Now, Benjamin Netanyahu has taken the witness stand in his corruption trial for the first time. The Israeli Prime Minister entered a packed courtroom to face long-standing charges in 3 separate cases, describing the charges against him, fraud, breach of trust and accepting bribes, as absurd. Outside the courthouse, opponents and supporters of the Prime Minister held separate demonstrations in a case that has bitterly divided the country. It's the first time a sitting Israeli Prime Minister has given testimony as a criminal defendant. Now, Dalia Schendlin is a political analyst and fellow at the US think tank the Century Foundation. She joins us from Tel Aviv, where she attended today's court session. Welcome to DW. This was the Prime Minister's first day in court in his own trial, which began years ago. What did you make of his first appearance?
I would say there wasn't a terrible surprise in the sense that Netanyahu used a large portion of the nearly 6 hours of court proceedings and his testimony to make big, sweeping narrative statements about his life, his biography, even going back to his ancestors, his father, his grandfather, and to put himself into a long line of Israel's own history to try to portray, to both the judges, but I think primarily to the Israeli public, what a great statesman he is, what a key figure he's been in Israeli history, and what a great statesman he is at the level of global affairs. That was, I would say, the overriding theme. But then, of course, he has many sub-themes that he has consistently used pretty much throughout the investigations and primarily since he was indicted in 2019, which is that these charges will amount to nothing. They are essentially either fictional or even fabricated, and that he is being uniquely persecuted because he represents the true voice of the people, and that some sort of a deep state elite, a term that he doesn't use himself, but which kind of is implied by everything he says, is trying to take him down. And these were the themes that came out in much of his testimony today.
And as you alluded there, he claims these cases are politically motivated. So how did they come about?
Well, they came about because there were investigations into what might have been criminal offenses. The attorney general who pursued those investigations was a Netanyahu appointee himself. He's the previous attorney general, Avichai Mendelblit. They went through a long police investigation, and the police team found 4 different cases in which he might have been a suspect. In one of them, he was not actually named as a suspect, so that one fell. That case fell apart, and he's not being charged in that case. But there were 3 remaining cases in which there was apparently sufficient evidence to go to trial. That's the normal way the judiciary works. That's how the legal system works. And this is essentially a normal proceeding. It's also certainly not the first time in Israeli history that political leaders at the top levels, whether it's a prime minister, senior ministers, or a president of the country, have been investigated, prosecuted, and sometimes convicted. But usually, not only usually, of course, it's completely unprecedented that they would be going through these proceedings while they are in office, for the simple reason that at least twice before that I can remember, when there was even a possibility of being indicted, 2 different prime ministers resigned in advance. Right. That's Yitzhak Rabin in his first term in the 1970s, and Ehud Olmert in 2009, when he was facing what later became indictment, prosecution, and even conviction. So this is not anything unusual, actually.
And so if found guilty, does that mean jail, or does his position as Prime Minister give him some wiggle room there? And briefly, if you wouldn't mind.
No, it doesn't. He's not shielded from conviction and jail time from being Prime Minister, but we don't know anything about the kind of sentence this might bring. That we'll have to leave that to find out if there's even a conviction at all. And so the claim by some of the critics of Netanyahu is that he wants to stay in office in order to avoid conviction. That's not a very strong claim. He can still be convicted. But I think the stronger claim is that the longer he drags out the proceedings, the more they're delayed, the more there's a possibility of a different attorney general who might decide to slow or even drop the cases. And so those criticisms are all part of the Israeli discourse right now.
OK, thank you for guiding us through that so clearly. Political analyst Dalia Schendlin from the Century Foundation.
Thank you for having me.